It's not about, it's not about, it's not about the injury. It's not about, it's not about, it's not about the injury. It's about the recovery. It's about the recovery.
Hi folks, Paul Padda here with you for another wonderful episode of our Paul Padda podcast, coming to you from Red Chimp Studios on July 24th in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm really honored and privileged to have Dona West on our show today. Dona, you are the chairwoman of the Clark County Democratic Party.
Yes.
And that's a big title and a lot of responsibility, especially coming up, right, with an election.
It is. It's a very busy time.
I bet. But before we get into all of that, I want to ask you a little bit about yourself, because
Sure.
our viewers are always kind of intrigued to know a little bit about people's backgrounds. I think it's just kind of interesting. You know, tell us, where are you a native of Las Vegas? If not, where did you move from? How many years have you lived here?
I've lived in Nevada 45 years. I grew up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, which most people will recognize as Pennsylvania Dutch country.
Right.
When my mother retired, I had a working mom. My parents moved to Carson City, and I moved with them and went to college in California.
I think you qualify as much as anyone could qualify as a true
45.
native of
That's about as close as you get.
Yeah.
And I spent 30 years working in state government. I was
Wow.
the administrator of all the branch offices at the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so worked a lot with the legislature, the governor's office, and always enjoyed that part of my work. And then when I retired, I was able to volunteer on campaigns and get involved, starting with John Kerry for president.
That's going back. Were you always politically engaged?
I couldn't be as much because running a state agency, you have to work with both sides
Right.
to get your budget passed, to get your bills passed.
Well, if you were ahead of DMV, I'm sure you encountered a lot of politics.
A lot of politics. Everybody wanted a special plate.
Right.
We went through a lot of changes in the DUI laws.
Right.
So yeah, we did a lot of work with the legislature.
What would you say is the one thing about Las Vegas or Nevada in general that you love? I mean, obviously you've decided to stay here, you were raised here. Many people tend to sometimes move away from a place. What kept you here, and what do you love about this state?
Well, I love the desert, and it's a beautiful place. And I love the diversity of Las Vegas, and just everybody coming here, and the convenience, actually, of living here. Whenever I travel, like back home to Pennsylvania, I'm always surprised that I can't go run to the store at 11 o'clock at night and get something.
That's
so
true.
it's just it's a great place to live. I raised my daughter here. It's a great town. All of my friends are here, and so I'm here to stay.
Yeah, you know, one of the things, I moved here in 2004, and one of the things I love about Las Vegas and Nevada in general, I think it's one of the most welcoming places. There are a lot of places like Los Angeles, New York, big cities. It's really hard to break in if you're a newcomer.
It is.
And for me, when I came here, I was just amazed at how friendly and outgoing people were. I remember going to an event, and I met Senator Harry Reid at the time. I was shocked. I thought, I was watching this gentleman on TV when I was in D.C. before I moved here, and here I am. I can just go to an event. It's like 5 o'clock on a Friday, and someone calls you and says, "Hey, do you want to come down and go to this event?" And there's the majority leader. That's amazing.
I always tell people, I love living in a small state like Nevada because we call our senators Catherine and Jackie.
Right.
And we see them everywhere.
Yeah.
And we have a different relationship, I feel like, with our elected officials than when I grew up in Pennsylvania. I couldn't have told you who the governor was. Yeah, both
Republican or
sides.
Democrat, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Even I remember I went to an event for Governor Sandoval, and I was amazed that here I was, just 2 feet away from him, able to shake his hand and talk to me about football and baseball. Why'd you move to Las Vegas? And it was just really kind of cool to be able to have that kind of access to government leaders.
It really is. It's one of the things I love.
All right, so tell us about the Clark County Democratic Party. Tell us what you do and what is it?
Well, we are the wing of the party. We're chartered under the state party here. And I'm a full-time volunteer. We don't have any paid staff. Everybody that works for the county party is a volunteer. And our job is to organize to get Democrats elected. Simply put, our job is to get Democrats elected. Right. So everything we do, whether we're organizing phone banks or texting, registering voters, giving people rides to the poll, all of it is towards the end of getting Democrats elected. And we keep building on our success.
So how does it work? Is there, I mean, for a lot of my viewers who are watching this who may not be that tuned in to politics, or at least the political infrastructure, does each county have a Democratic and Republican Party?
Yes.
So Clark County would be, and you have a counterpart on the Republican side,
I
would
do.
imagine. Okay.
I do, and then every one of the 17 counties has a Democratic and a Republican Party that organize the same way.
I see.
And
And then there's a state party as well, right?
Right, there is a state party that we are all chartered under and we work with, and they provide a lot of the direction about what we're doing, and we work with them in tandem to organize here.
So, like, a lot of people watch the Democratic or Republican National Convention, and I've always wondered this myself, is sort of, how do people get chosen to be the delegates at those conventions?
Well, you have to go to your caucus, then you have to go to your county convention, and you have to go to your state convention and be elected as a national delegate. In 2016, I was a national delegate for Hillary Clinton and was actually our delegation whip, which means I was responsible for all of her delegates and our operation on the floor when it came to roll call.
I see. Okay. And are there smaller groups within the Democratic caucus, would you say, even below kind of the Clark County Democratic Party that people can join?
Yes, we have 20 chartered clubs and caucuses. If you live in Summerlin, there's the Red Rock Democratic Club. We have a club of 400 members in Sun City Anthem out in Henderson. And then we have issue-oriented caucuses, the Stonewall Dems, the Education Caucus, where people who are maybe not just interested in the Democratic Party as a whole, but what attracts them is the issues that we're fighting for, and so they join a caucus and get involved that way. And those are all listed on our clarkdems.com website.
Well, in honor of our mutual friend Judy Klein, I can't leave out the Women's Democratic Caucus.
Yes.
I think that's got to be one of the most important and powerful caucuses.
It
no?
is the oldest club in the state.
Yeah.
And we have seen so many members of that club achieve elected office.
Yeah.
Many of the women elected to legislature, to the first woman-led legislature in the nation, are members of the Women's Democratic Club.
Yeah.
And definitely a very powerful group. They do a lot of work fundraising and helping financially support our candidates, and we could not do our job without them.
Well, I'll just say I'm very proud to live in a state that has a majority female legislature and I think a majority female Supreme Court.
That's correct.
And this may not be a politically correct thing to say, but I actually believe women are smarter than men. And I think it is long overdue to see that. And the fact that we live in a state that's driving that change. And I'm not saying that to make a political statement, but I just think that it's so long overdue. Women have been so marginalized in history. And to think that we live in a country that has all these freedoms and rights, and now finally we're seeing women break through that glass ceiling, and I think that's just fantastic.
I think we've seen a lot of good evidence of the work that women can do in our state. The women at the Nevada legislature this year really built a lot of consensus on bills, and instead of bills just dying, they really worked to edit bills, to revise them, to put in amendments and bring the best bills forward that they could on subjects. And we saw things like paid leave, protecting a woman's right to choose, that these women worked very hard to provide for Nevadans.
Yeah, it's amazing. What an accomplishment. So what do you see as the future for the party here in the state?
Well, we're constantly growing. We just held board elections. Our board was just elected. I've just got elected to my second term. And so now we're organizing around getting ready for caucus. And so we have people signing up to become precinct captains, to lead their caucus, to organize their neighborhoods, to get their neighbors out to express their choice for who they want the nominee to be.
You know, one thing that's I think that's an important point that needs to be brought out that's really kind of interesting is and I think this came up in the last national election. I think a lot of people were surprised to, with the email hacking of the DNC server, and then also, you know, the controversy between the Sanders people and the Hillary people, and then even within the Republican Party, issues about, you know, collusion, et cetera. I don't think a lot of people understand that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are actually private entities. They're not part of the government itself.
That's right. They are private, and they run themselves. They're responsible for how they operate, for making their rules within the body. Each has a Rules and Bylaws Committee. Obviously now they have far more invested interest in technical security and protecting themselves, while the government has the responsibility for protecting the elections and the electoral process.
Sure, yeah, exactly. Well, what do you see the biggest challenge for the Democratic Party in this state? I mean, and that's a kind of, I guess, a little bit of an odd question, given that, you know, the Dems have controlled the governorship and both Senate seats and the majority of Congress people, but do you see a challenge for the party?
I see opportunity. I see a huge slate of candidates that appeal to everyone. When I talk to most of our Democrats, they're still shopping for a candidate. They have a first and maybe second choice.
You're talking about the presidential
race. And you know, that's what's really spurring people on. But we also want them to remember that we need to reelect Democrats to our 3 House seats from Southern Nevada, that we are going to have 58 judicial positions on the ballot next year.
No, but those are nonpartisan, correct?
They're nonpartisan, but what we do as a party is we identify who the Democrats are.
I see.
Unfortunately, we live in a time where people would like to know who represents their party and their party's values. And so we try and share that information with voters so that they can factor that into their decision making if they're not as familiar with someone that's running for a judicial position.
Now, do you think you could ever vote for a Republican?
I probably have for judge in the past without knowing, but other than that, in the time that we live in, no. And I was born and raised in a Republican county in a Republican household, and shocked my father when I registered to vote as a Democrat.
Wow.
He was not happy, but I registered in 1974, 2 months after Richard Nixon resigned. So that die was cast.
Maybe that was the impetus. All right.
It was.
Well, we're going to take a small break, and then we're going to come back with some interesting follow-up questions. And right now we're going to go to a section what's called Paul Padda for the People, where we give some pointers on legal tips. Today's topic is going to be nursing home abuse, a really important topic. Hopefully this will be some helpful information. Hi folks, Paul Padda of Paul Padda Law. Paul Padda for the People with another great pointer. You know, one of the saddest type of cases that we get, and I've handled before, are nursing home neglect cases. These cases really break your heart. These are cases involving often elderly folks who are in a assisted care facility or a nursing home, for lack of a better way of putting it, where they're supposed to receive medical care. And as a result of not getting the proper medical care, some of these folks get bed sores, their clothes don't get changed. Maybe in the most extreme situations, they're subject or manipulated into financial exploitation by a member of the staff at that nursing home who gets them to sign over documents or give them money, etc. It's horrible to think that that could happen, but guess what? It does happen. And at Paul Padda Law, we have the resources and experience in handling these kind of cases to get you a great result. If you have a loved one who's been in a nursing home or has experienced abuse in a nursing home, give us a call at Paul Padda Law. We know how to handle these cases, and we know how to get great results in these kind of cases. Paul Padda Law, here to help you. Hi folks, welcome back to the Paul Padda Podcast. I'm here with Dona West. We're having a great conversation, lots of great information, very informative.
Thanks.
Learning a lot. So for folks who are watching, what can they do to get involved? Let's say someone out there says, you know, I really like what Dona's saying.
Great.
I have a strong interest in politics. Obviously, they would be having to reach out to you as a Democrat.
Sure.
Unless you're inviting Republicans to join the party as well.
Well, we'll be happy to change their voter registration.
What can a person do who says, I'm inspired, I want to get more involved in politics?
I would encourage them to visit our clarkdems.com website, and under the Get Involved tab, click on there, fill out the form. You'll be joining something called our Central Committee.
Okay.
We meet on a quarterly basis, but we also use that group to organize from. Follow us on Facebook, Clark Democratic Party, and we list all of our events. We have debate watch parties next week. Come out, get to meet them, check out that list of clubs and caucuses we talked about. Find your neighborhood club, find that caucus that interests you, go start meeting Democrats, and we'll quickly get you involved.
Great. So is there also an office someone could just kind of walk into and say, hey, I want to volunteer?
We share space with the Nevada State Democratic Party. That office is at 2320 Paseo del Prado in Building B, Suite 107.
That's kind of over by Sahara and
It's
15, right?
Yeah,
Roughly.
right by Sahara and the 15, right in the middle of town.
Yeah.
And they're open 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. We actually have organizing staff already hired on staff, working towards getting ready for caucus, so they can walk in and say, I want to volunteer.
Wow, that's great.
And we're starting to phone bank to let people know about caucus, so we can get you involved.
Okay. Well, you know, Nevada is a really interesting state because it occupies a really important place, I think, in the Democratic nominating process. Can you explain? I think, and a lot of people, I think a lot of credit was given to Senator Reid for doing that. But explain to people, and I'm sure a lot of people out there wonder, why is Iowa at first? And how do states get selected as far as the primary process?
Well, Iowa and New Hampshire are kind of historic first states, and they've held those positions, and the DNC respects that.
Yeah.
Harry Reid, as you said, worked very hard to have us actually use our status as a caucus rather than a primary state and move us up to where we are third in the nation and we are first in the West. And we take a lot of pride in that. It brings the candidates here. It brings them to the first state of really vast diversity with the fastest growing AAPI community, a large Latinx population.
When you say AAPI, you mean Asian Pacific folks?
Asian
People of
Pacific,
Asian descent?
Asian American Pacific Islander folks.
Okay.
Sorry to use an acronym.
That's all right.
But we just have really fast growing populations here and very diverse. And so when I talk with the candidates for national office, they like to come here because they feel like they're talking, what they have to say here, their messaging applies to the entire country.
Just going back, what's the difference between a primary and a caucus state?
Caucus, you come together with your neighbors and you meet at the precinct level.
Right.
Primary, you're going to go in and you're going to cast a ballot like any other election.
Yeah.
Here we cast what we call a presidential preference card, and we've changed our caucuses. Next year, you'll be able to caucus by phone, what we're calling a virtual caucus.
Yeah.
February 15th and 16th. You have to be a registered Democrat by November 30th of this year to phone it in, but you can stay home. We're hoping this is going to help people with disabilities, people who have mobility issues, younger voters who might be more interested in using technology than hanging out with their neighbors.
Yeah.
We're having 4 days of early voting starting on February the 15th, and there'll be locations around the county. You'll just drop in, fill out your presidential preference card, and leave. And then for those of us who want to meet our neighbors, want to talk about our platform, and want to have an opportunity to see who's supporting who, we're going to meet on Saturday, February 22nd at our precinct level.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I know you're obviously neutral as far as you know, who you think might be successful on the Democratic side as the ultimate nominee, but what's interesting to me is, like, I think literally every week there's someone coming here to this state, which is really fascinating because a lot of places you don't see that, right?
No, you don't.
That's what's really cool about living in Nevada is that we are very important, and a lot of these politicians are coming out here to kind of connect with the voters. What do you think about the campaign so far?
I think it's energized. They show a lot of interest in Nevada. They're getting to know us. And they value what our voters have to say. They're really listening.
Yeah.
And so I love that they're all coming, and certainly one of the best parts of my job right now is getting to meet with all of them and their staff and to hear what they're proposing, and then to see how we can engage our voters to get to know them as well.
Well, the one thing about Nevada that is interesting, and I think you touched on this, is that the diversity. And diversity is not just racial diversity.
No.
When we say diversity, we're talking, we have snowbirds from other states.
Yeah.
We have a lot of transplants from other states. We have retirees. We have people who are union workers.
Yes.
We have, of course, a large racially diverse population, a large Latino population.
And a large veteran population.
And a large veteran population, that's right, great point. And so it's kind of like all these issues. I think it's actually really hard to be a politician in this state, don't you think? Because there is historically, Nevada has had a very strong libertarian streak. And I don't think you can be super conservative or super liberal in the state. You kind of have to be somewhere in the middle, it seems.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
I agree that you've got to listen to everybody, and I find that the most successful politicians in our state are those who listen and really see the different perspectives and take those and bring them together to put a comprehensive plan together that can approach and appeal to everybody.
I know a lot of Republicans were upset with Governor Sandoval over some of the things he did. And I know some Democrats might feel with respect to Governor Sisolak that maybe he, depends on your perspective, that he's kind of being a little bit more moderate. But I really believe that's where most people are, is sort of in the middle. And you, as a governor, you have to have a pragmatic approach. And it seems to me like he's doing a pretty good job, kind of as was Governor Sandoval.
Yeah, there's a difference between campaigning and governing. And when you're governing, you are the governor for everybody in the state.
And all business interests and balancing that against also, the need to provide social services, et cetera.
And I've seen Governor Sisolak be very thoughtful in that process, as was Governor Sandoval. And I think that's important.
Very important.
And understanding that sometimes you can't take as big of a leap on an issue as you'd like to, but we're going to slowly work our way there, and to know that this was his first session, and when we come back next time, let's see where we are on that issue as a state and how do we move it forward.
Yeah, that's true. Well, let's talk about the Clark County Commission, because I think a lot of people, I mean, when I moved here, I kind of understood what they do, but I think a lot of people don't realize the importance and the power that the commission has, and that in a state like this, in many respects, the Clark County Commission is almost more powerful, or as powerful as other branches, like, for example, the legislature or even the governor's office. For folks who don't really know as much about it, can you describe what it does?
Well, they make a lot of decisions on the local level. They are the go-to people on all kinds of local issues, whether
the airport,
it's airport, public lands, the police department, the water department. While a lot of these entities have the ability to make a lot of decisions on their own, the guiding force and our central place to talk about those issues is our county commission. And when you have a legislature that meets only every other year, and you have a commission that meets on a regular basis, that's here locally, where to talk to legislators, you either go down to the Sawyer building and talk to them on video teleconference, or you go to Carson City.
Right.
Our commissioners live in our districts. Again, we see them everywhere. And they talk about not just, do you need a stop sign in your neighborhood? They talk about a lot of the big issues about quality of life, public safety, and those issues that are affecting us. And so it's a very powerful position. Coming from Pennsylvania, it's very unique to me to have watched some of our legislators like Chris June Kiliani and Tick Sagerbloom, who were very successful legislators, go to the county commission. In most states, that wouldn't happen. It would be the other way. But here, our legislators still want to be involved and still believe that there's policy making to be done at the local level at our county commission.
Is it a more competitive race to win as a Clark County Commissioner than it is state legislature?
It can be, and it will be again next year. It was this past.
Is it a partisan race?
It is a partisan race.
Okay.
It is a partisan race.
So what's the current makeup in terms of Democrats versus Republicans?
100% Democrat.
100% Democrat, okay. It
And
looks like you've done a good job.
We're looking to hang on to that. But I think we're going to have Larry Brown is term limited, as is Lawrence Weekly. So Commission District C and D are going to be very competitive next year, and I think we'll have competitive Democratic primaries.
So there are going to be people challenging even the incumbents.
I think we're in a time where if you want to run, you run. And it's going to be very interesting to see who decides they're going to step up into those seats. There are a lot of people, I think, eyeing them, and I've already seen a couple candidates declare for C.
Well, you bring up an interesting issue, because I have friends who have political ambitions, and I've heard this before. Well, what is there for me to run for if I'm a Democrat? All these positions are occupied. But I think that with such an abundance of where you occupy so many seats, you probably will see more primary challenges for
Yeah.
people who are just kind of want to get into it.
They want to get involved.
Yeah.
And now's the time, I think.
So what's your view on that? Do you encourage that? Do you discourage that? Do you say, you know what, it's a democracy. If you want to run and challenge an incumbent who's a Democrat, you have every right to do that?
It's not the party's position to say who should run and who shouldn't run.
Yeah.
Our job is to get those candidates in front of the voters and let the voters decide. And whoever the voters nominate, then we work really hard to get that person elected.
Yeah, I think that's the right attitude too, because ultimately, if we say this is a free democracy and everyone should get involved, then I'm against the idea of, you know, just an incumbency for the sake of an incumbency. If
Yeah.
you have better ideas, they should prevail. But that's my own personal view.
And we see more competition when there's an open seat like we're facing in Commission C and D.
Yeah.
When the incumbent has termed out and there's an opening, or if the seat's held by a Republican, as some of the legislative seats that we saw that we turned last session.
Yeah.
Then Democrats, you know, really we want somebody to run for every seat.
All right, turning to the presidential race, do you think there's too many people in the race and it's just too confusing for voters?
Most voters are just starting to tune in.
Yeah.
I personally like it. I've heard it said that there's no downside to running for president.
Yeah.
You're getting your name out there.
That's
You're
true.
fundraising. You have the stage to make your point and talk about your issues. And I like it. And
Yeah.
so far, as long as everybody is playing fair and we're not going negative on one another and hurting one another,
Right.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Well, what other challenges do you see coming up for the party in general, or just let's talk about politics in general? What do you see as the biggest challenges?
The biggest challenge is getting people engaged.
Yeah.
And when you are organizing in a 24-hour community, in a community where we have jobs that are low paying, and we have a lot of our population who are working 2, sometimes 3 jobs. We're out knocking on doors and we may not find you at home. Finding a way to connect with those voters and making them aware of caucus coming up, making them aware of the general election. You know, we've got some changes our legislature has made in voting, where we're restoring voting rights to those who have previously served their time for a felony, where we're going to have same-day voter registration. Getting that information out to people in our environment in Clark County can be challenging.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work.
So what's the most challenging part of it? Is it because we have a transient population, or it's just that there's so many methods of communicating with people, the traditional, I mean, most people don't have a landline anymore.
Nope.
Which makes me question the accuracy of a lot of these polls, because I've seen polls now that over just in the last 5 years are constantly being proven wrong, right? We see things like, for example, Donald Trump's election.
Yeah.
Nobody saw that coming. Most pollsters were saying, oh, Hillary Clinton's going to glide to victory, but they totally miscalled it. And the reason is, I think, just because of the traditional methods of polling don't seem to work anymore, right?
Yeah, one of the things that we saw last cycle, and I know that we'll engage again, is texting people.
Yeah.
Get them on their cell phone, send them a text. You can, in a 24-hour environment like we have, we can catch them. They can pick up that text when they're ready and get back to us. And we actually can have a conversation and engage with people.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't pick up their phone to unknown numbers. I know I don't. And so trying to reach people, whether it's on the phone or on the doors, just finding that way of getting the information out there to them and connecting with them in a way that we can listen to their concerns, that we can relate that back to our candidates, and that we can tell people how to participate.
That's great. Well, one final thing that I wanted to talk to you about, it's just an observation. I find that the older generation is very party driven. And I find younger people, especially the millennial generation, is very issue driven. And maybe that's simply because I think that they're, you know, facing life ahead of them, and they're really motivated by the particular issue, not so much by the R or the D next to the candidate's name. What's the challenge for you as a party leader in bringing those type of people into your party? Because it seems that millennials are not super motivated to necessarily join a party as much as they are to vote for a candidate based on issues.
It's true that they are issue oriented, and not knowing the parties, maybe watching some of the things they don't like about the two-party structure in our country, they opt to go nonpartisan. What we're working very hard to do is to reach out to them and say, we have this slate of candidates.
Yeah.
Somebody there is going to appeal to you. Maybe it's Cory Booker. Maybe it's Kamala Harris. Joe Biden has a lot of young followers. Maybe it's Andrew Yang. It's somebody that isn't the standard politician that they haven't heard of, but he's talking about the issues that matter to them. Maybe it's net neutrality.
Yeah.
And we're finding that that's starting to bring people in, and young people aren't sure what a caucus is, and they haven't necessarily heard positive things about it. But we're talking to them about these are all the ways you can participate. You can stay home in your pajamas, hop on the phone, and caucus, and vote for the person that you believe in, and understand that that person represents the values of our party.
And the values of the party get shaped by the people who are at the events who are advocating for those issues. So the best way to really get involved, whether you want to be a Republican or a Democrat, is to join the local party, correct?
Join the local party. We'll be holding platform hearings next year. When you caucus, you have an opportunity to put forward your ideas, whether it's something about net neutrality, student loans, health care. What are your thoughts? Where should we be going as a party? And that drives up from the county level to the state platform to the national platform. And in 2016, one of the best things I think we did is we really opened up that platform process, and we put a lot of new ideas in our platform. And so if you care about issues, get involved with your party and start talking about our platform. What do we stand for? What are our principles? What are our values?
That's great. All right, once again, if folks want to get involved, where can they find the Clark County Democratic Party?
ClarkDems.com.
.com. Oh, that's pretty easy. Okay.
And our list of clubs and caucuses are there. You can send us an email, which I get and I answer as quickly as I can, and talk to you about how we can get you engaged.
Wonderful. Donna, this has really been insightful. Thank you so much for coming on board and
Thanks
educating
for the time.
folks about the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. All right, folks, until next time, we've had a wonderful podcast today. Stay tuned, stay informed, and stay cool.
It's not about